Hello, everybody. I'm Stan Fitzgerald with Veterans for America First, and this is our media arm of the organization, the Vet Voice. I am here with some wonderful patriots, Mrs. Barbara Powers Wyatt, who is 91 years young. She is the author of the 1975 book, We Came Home. She also worked for the Reagan administration. I also have Dr. Darrell, retired Colonel, U.S. Air Force, true patriot, who has an extensive service record, and a former Marine, Greg Beacon, who's also a patriot, and he's one of our hosts. He's going to take over this interview. I just want to say to Ms. Wyatt, interesting note, I was a driver for President Reagan in 1986.
Wonderful man.
Oh, yes, he was. He was a gentleman, and he personally signed a thank you note to each and every one of us police officers that helped him. It was not stamped, it was hand signed.
Wow, that's terrific. That's a keeper.
He was a great man.
Yes,
But let me turn this over to Greg, and he'll handle the interview.
All right, thank you, Stan. So, Barbara, so you came out with a book, the Vietnam War. It was titled "We Came Home" in 1975, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about a few things about it. A, what inspired you to write the book? B, how long did it take? Was it your first book? And I guess we can start with those two questions before we branch off somewhere else.
Well, the reason I got into this was my husband, who was a Navy captain, was back at Beaupers, and he happened to meet Marlene McGrath, whose husband was at that time an MIA. And he said to Marlene, if there's ever anything we can do for you, don't hesitate to call. So about a year later, I got a call, and I was living in Los Angeles. And the voice said, this is Marlene McGrath. I met your husband in Washington. And he said, if we ever needed anything in Los Angeles, to give you a call. So I said, oh yes, Marlene, I know all about you. And yes, what can we do to help? And she said, well, I have a dear friend whose husband is also an MIA, and we have 4 sons between the 2 of us. And we'd like to come down to Disneyland. I said, I will arrange it. So we talked more about it. And so we set up a time. And I said, now, when you drive past this one particular house that's next door to ours, and that's Bob Pope's. She said, oh, I want to meet him. So I said, well, let me see if he's in town. So we did go over and meet Bob. And she came down with her friend Betty Estes. Again, he was an Air Force pilot as well. No, I'm sorry about that. Mike was a Navy pilot, as was Ed. So we went over and met Bob, and they thanked him for all he had done for the troops. And then we went to Disneyland. It was a wonderful time. So that gives you how I came to be involved with the POWs. And when they came home, both Ed and Mike were reclassified as POWs. So I said to my husband at the time, I said, their messages need to be saved. And the next morning, I got up and I said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to write to each one of the 591 and ask for this message to the American people. That's what I did. And it took me the better part of 2 years to get it in. I got those letters out, but of course, as you know, they were very busy, many in the hospital and meeting their families for the first time. So with that, it took a little time, but I finally got 465 of them. And so that was the mission. And then so many people said, well, what are they doing now? I thought, okay, 50th anniversary is this next year from when they came home in 73. So I thought I will update the book. So I did. And that's what we have coming out now, the 50th anniversary. And it has one more of the POWs who has an interesting story to go with it. And it has so many pictures. And that is the story of how this book came to be.
That's a pretty heartfelt thing to go. I mean, when you hear about POWs, we know that granted, every enemy we fought, it's when our people get taken as POWs and not treated well, but Vietnam was one of the worst ones. I mean, they're
terrible.
They're ruthless. The conditions they had them in, they obviously didn't follow protocol and stuff like that. So the POWs over there probably, felt just lonely and totally hopeless and stuff like that. They were probably forgot. They were probably in the mindset that they were just totally forgotten about back at home. And so during that time you were writing the book, there was a ton of debates and controversy about the war itself, whether we should have even been involved in it, why we still there, stuff like that. Were there any personal reasons that might have prevented you from, or that might have had you thinking twice about even making the book? Or
No, because I feel I'm a patriot, and I think those men, every last one of them, well, no, there were several who were not as patriotic as they should have been. They accepted some gifts from their enemy and went home early. But the majority of them, certainly that wouldn't have amounted to more than 10 who were, as I call them, the turncoats. But the others, every one of them speak of God and country. There is not one negative. And as one said, we don't make the policies. We just follow them. We do what we're told to do.
That's right.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you have a military background in your family. You said your husband also as well. Now, was he in the Vietnam War as well?
No, Fred was considerably older than I. When I married him, I was a TWA stewardess, and sat down with him on takeoff, and we married 6 months later. Fred was a Navy commander at that time, and he was at Iwo Jima and Okinawa on carriers, and he retired as a captain. My brother is a captain who was at Vietnam flying P-3s. I have 4 nephews who are Navy pilots and a son who served in Iraq in the Navy. So I wear my stripe.
You see, yes, it sounds like your whole family has put on some sort of uniform at some point in their life, which is terrific. You don't really see that anymore. It's not what it used to be, but I want to kind of branch over really quick. You did mention that you did work in the Reagan administration. Would you like to share a little bit about that as well?
Well, I will say he was a wonderful man, and he wrote the foreword to one of the forewords for the book. Bob Hope wrote the other one.
I can show you the book, Barbara. You want me to hold up the book so everyone knows what we're talking about?
Yes.
So this is one of the originals, and you can see how big it is.
Yeah.
And there's pictures for everyone to see of each POW.
And it has a picture of either their homecoming, or some of them are their military pictures. I said whatever they wanted to put in there, they could write it, but there isn't one negative. I will say that for it. As to Reagan, one Memorial Day, I got a phone call and the voice said, "Is Mrs. Wyatt there?" And I said, "This is she." He said, "This is Ronald Reagan." I said, "Ronald Reagan?" He said, "Yes, I just wanted to tell you, I'm so excited about your book. Yes, I will do the foreword. And yes, I will send you the pictures from the reception." So he was a wonderful, wonderful man. And I did do work in his administration. Was one of the ones who started the Missing Children program and a number of other programs. I like to start things and get them going, and then leave somebody else to go carry on with it after it's finished. But that wasn't true with this book. I did the first one myself, and then Darrell has been very helpful in getting this updated, because I'm not computer savvy, and so it took a lot of help, and Darrell was instrumental in doing that.
Yeah.
I think he gave up his social life for weeks.
I was actually going to ask him. I was going to branch off the conversation to him, but I do have a really quick last follow-up question for you. Have any of the POWs or the families of the POWs that are included in your book, reached out to you or received a copy of the book or anything like that? Do you have any stories?
Well, they all have a copy of the first edition, and I've been to their reunions and they are just wonderful, upbeat men. I cannot say enough for them. I met them, I've met their wives and corresponded with them and have telephone calls with them. So I'm very close to them. Not all, obviously, because I would say over half of them have passed away by now.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very, very touching gesture, and I'm glad you are relaunching it. And you said you were updating it a little bit as well. And
I took each one of them. There were 465 who responded, who were in the book, and I updated every one of theirs, either contacting them or finding information about them, so I knew what they had been doing. Some of them didn't last long after they came home, and some of them are still going strong. And they're just, I can't say enough about them, and they are so positive and upbeat. And 25 of them made flag rank. So, and some of them, 17 of them have passed on.
yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's inevitable. The Vietnam War was a long time ago, and our veterans, nobody lasts forever. Our veterans won't last forever. Our World War II veterans are down. There's only a handful left, and I always think it's important to honor them throughout the rest of their lives, because some of them made sacrifices that people can't even imagine, and some of them have physically or mentally paid the price for something they've done, as an early 20-year-old. In a country that they don't even call home. So I think it's a great gesture, and I'm looking forward to this. Actually, that's what I want to ask you really quick. Do you have an idea on when this should be finished?
Well, Mike or Darrell, you can address that.
So yeah, so Barbara signed with a company, a publisher called Ballast Books, and they've already finished the editing of the actual words and all of Barbara's updates. So it'll be roughly 850 pages, and the publisher has told us around December. So we want it available before Christmas, and they have told us they'll be able to meet that deadline. So we hope that within the next month or two, they'll launch a website and start taking pre-orders. So
Yeah.
it should be available on all the major bookstores online. You'll be able to get it electronically, hard copy and soft copy. And the copy that I showed you, this is just a piece of paper of it. This is the original, but the new cover will have a 50th anniversary, as Barbara mentioned. We don't exactly have a price point yet, but all of the proceeds for the book are going to go to veterans and veteran organizations. So I'm not going to be profiting at all from the royalties. And even the first book, Barbara's first book, well before I knew her, she gave the money that she made from that to veteran organizations as well. So we'll let you know soon. We'd love to have you guys help us tell the community about it, because I think this book will make just the average American more patriotic. And I think just me as a retired Air Force and someone who actually went through the survival school training because of men identified in this book, I learned a lot, but you never really know what it's going to be like in captivity. But this book gives you a really good idea. I remember reading James N. Rowe's book called 7 Years to Freedom. And much of that time was spent in isolation. And I think a lot of the men and women in America, they've, the ones that are alive today, they've either forgotten about the Vietnam War, or they don't think about the POWs themselves. But especially this book, Barbara's book, focuses on the Operation Homecoming, which was the operation in 1973 that brought all of these men home. And that's when they wrote the letters to Barbara. And she took those letters and alphabetized them in the book and did a lot of labor of love to put it in the book. And Barbara, you know this, but just to the viewers, I feel that love in this book. I mean,
right, you do.
I mean, they lost a lot by being a POW. Many of them got divorced. They came home. They didn't even know they had children, or their children had never seen them. But you know, when you read this book, it's not all about the tragedies. One of the updates in the book is from Mike McGrath. Mike McGrath wrote, he was in during the congressional testimonies of the all these POWs and their treatment. He had some line drawings that were entered in for the congressional record. Barbara put me in touch with him, and we're actually using some of his line drawings to show some of the torture that these POWs experienced, which was tragic. But this book talks about how happy they were when they came home, how their relationship with God grew. You know, their faith grew while they were POWs, and how much they realized how much friends and families mean to you. So it's a wonderful, inspirational book, and it doesn't really focus on the war as much as the personal struggle that these men went through.
And Greg, I'd also like to say humor played a tremendous amount in keeping their spirits up and keeping them going. And it has some of the humor in it, and you can't help but chuckle. But silly things that, as I said, silly childish things really touched them. And so they found laughter in a lot of situations.
Yeah, there's I mean, it's still like that today. Military, you have to have humor or everything's just miserable. And what I found is people in the military have probably the best sense of humor, and very easily entertained as well. So yeah.
So can I interject one
Please.
thing? I just want to tell everyone that Barbara is such a wonderful woman. And I first met her at American Legion, where she was actually giving a POW presentation to my post, post 6-8 in DC, but we were here in Virginia using a VFW facility. But I was really awed at how someone could be so passionate about the POWs. And when she showed me this book, I didn't really know that what was it, Barbara, 2 years later, that I would help her get this book into reprint. But this book is an original. This book in 1975, they didn't have computers back then to be able to digitize it. So the fact that we were able to get it digitized for posterity, the Commissioner of Veteran Affairs for Virginia, Daniel Gade, he has agreed to put it into the Virginia History Museum. And so this book is going to be entered into that history museum, along with some of the original photos and the new copy of We Came Home. So this book is going to be a historical record. And our publisher, Ballast Books, said this isn't really a book. This is an anthology because it's so big. But I don't want viewers to think that they can't read an 850-page book. I know when I was in the military, if you told me I had to read an 850-page book, I would have a hard time even just getting started. But this is individual short stories of these men. It's only a couple pages, even a 1 page per POW, because, you know, like Barbara said, there's over 400 in the book. But it's a very easy read, and I think everybody will fall in love with America again just by reading this book. And if I can say, Greg, I think you talked about the politics involved in writing this kind of a book. I know Nixon, historically, Nixon gets a really bad rap for what happened during his presidency. But the POWs in this book really do say one of the reasons they came home, outside of the great military campaigns like Linebacker 1 and 2, but it was President Nixon. It was a force of nature. He used all of his presidential powers, and he put a lot of personal interest into getting these POWs home. And a lot of the POWs give President Nixon credit for that. Did I say that right, Barbara?
Yes, and they are going to have a reprint of that, shall I say, next year, the 50th anniversary, out at the Nixon Library. And the surviving POWs and their families will be invited to that, and they are going to replicate it as much as they can. Of course, they won't have Bob Hope and people like that there, but they will have people who love America like we do.
Yeah, and the POW dinner at the time at the White House, I believe, was the largest dinner ever held at the White House at the time. And the pictures of that dinner, some of the original pictures from that dinner, are in this book.
Yes,
So-
Nixon sent them to me. President Nixon sent them. So you can't help but love them.
Yeah.
So-
Amazing.
I think what Mike McGrath, the POW, told me is there's over 60 POW books written, but not all of those have been entered into a history museum, and not all of those cover many POWs, let alone as many as Barbara has captured from this book. It's a really unique perspective, and I think it could be something that everybody could put on their coffee table.
Absolutely.
Lieutenant Colonel, we are certainly going to be ordering this book and asking our community to order it. And it's an amazing work you've done, Barbara. Lieutenant Colonel, is there any way we could help now? Did I happen to see some social media posts in advance?
Yes. So I would ask that if you go to GoFundMe, I've actually made a GoFundMe page, and it's actually I think if you just did a search for Vietnam POW book, you'll be able to find it. You'll see that I did have the POW MIA flag up for the first several people that donated, but now you'll see a copy of this book on the front page. And again, it's called We Came Home. If someone wants to go the traditional route, they can go to my VFW post 3150. That's VFW post 3150 in Arlington. And if they donate to the relief fund, just mention that you're donating this on behalf of the Vietnam POW book, and they'll get a tax deduction off of that donation. We haven't really talked about the cost, but this book was not really cheap to get published because it has so many pages. So a lot of the cost that people will pay for the book is really for the paper. And we are having a supply shortage of paper right now. So the paper from getting a book published in the States actually cost more now, but you'll get a little bit of a tax break going through the VFW 3150, and we'll earmark it for this book. But again, all of the donations for this will go to veterans and veteran groups. And I just thank everyone for even taking interest. Thank you for, Veterans for America First for being interested and just talking to us about this book. Your organization is the very first to interview Barbara for this book. And I think now that the publisher will start publicizing this, I hope Barbara will get many more interviews. I actually emailed the American Legion and the VFW and said, hey, we got this book coming up. But I don't think Americans realize the significance of this book. Plus, I think with the Ukraine war and other things distracting Americans, they may not be ready for this yet. But I think next year, I think the 50th anniversary will really bring it up in people's minds, and you'll have a lot of news organizations to talk about it. So
Absolutely.
thank you again.
And we look forward to seeing you on the news next year, Barbara, talking about this.
Oh, I will be 91 then. So it'll be an interesting time.
Well, thank you, Barbara, for everything you've done for this country, and you as well, Lieutenant Colonel, and you as well, Greg. I am not a veteran. I'm just a retired police detective. So that's why I asked Greg to come on. I didn't feel that was proper for me to handle this. So thank you all. And we'll do what
you've done.
Thank you, ma'am. And we'll do what we can to help promote your book. And it's a great cause. And thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Have a great evening.
You too. Good night, everybody.